Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group, and we are in the middle of our election season, and that means TV on TV works a little bit differently. We're not going to go to the news. We're not doing the news during this time period because we want every single minute available for our candidates. We have competitive races for select board, for school committee, and for library trustees. So many races, I can't even get them all on your television. So the library trustee races, we're going to drop all at once, digital only. We'll get those out to you soon. In the meantime, we've got three candidates for one seat on the select board. Today's guest is a candidate for select board. Today's guest is Liz Linder. Liz, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
I want to mention, because I didn't say it yet, and I think it's so important to say it, the election is Tuesday, May 6th. Now, you can vote early. You can vote early in person. You can vote early by mail. And I will let folks at home use their favorite search engine to figure out those details. They're not too hard to find. But know that you can always vote in person on Tuesday, May 6th, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. At your typical polling place. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, Liz, uh, what a nice home.
Oh, well, actually, thank you. This very large room in the front of my home, which was my gateway to being able to live into Brooklyn, to move into Brookline. It was my photo studio when I first moved here. I live in a four-story walk-up, and this used to be my operating studio. And now zooming from the closet.
I love
A
it.
little
I love
demo.
it.
Yep.
See, folks in Brookline know how to make use of tight spaces. But you haven't been a Brookline resident your entire life. Tell us about your whole life. What have you been doing this whole time?
My whole life. I know. How long do you have? Thanks. Um, so I was actually born in Boston, probably it's what's now the Brigham and Women's Hospital, so just down the street. That I don't remember that. I grew up in. I like to joke that I must have had a homing chip put in me because I grew up in New York, in a suburb of New York City in the 1970s, and very working class town, diverse group of friends. We ran around outside when you could do that, and the high school was a tougher high school, and my father worked for IBM, so we did the I've been moved transfer to a town that was had a better public school system, and that's where I got into photography, and that was my social connective tissue, I would say, and I've been involved in photography ever since. The short fast forward to I went to a liberal arts school, thought about being a lawyer, really liked constitutional law, but photography was my true passion. So when I got out of school, I rolled up my sleeves and I just kind of jumped in and learned everything I could and built a business and moved to Brookline 20 some odd years ago. My business started in Boston, now in Brookline. I've had a bigger and smaller studio. I incorporated. I started out in my home. I moved into a space in the South End, actually in Boston. Then I moved into what I like to joke is the South End of Brookline, which is Brookline Village. And my studio's moved around to a few different spaces, and now it's on Station Street. And everything that I do, I've learned from my parents. They've instilled very strong values in me. My mother, very kind, curious, interested in other people, smart as a tack. And my father is a child survivor of the Holocaust. So he's very resourceful, very industrious. He taught me, a lot about just seeing the world, being optimistic, being resourceful, being empathetic, and really trying to think ahead to unexpected things that could be happening. He used to egg me on when I had a little league soccer, and he used to like run up and down the sidelines screaming at me to like be aggressive, and I always hear that voice in the back of my head when I'm at certain inflection points in life. So um so I've had a photography business here. About 10 years ago I got involved in the Kent Station Street Senior Affordable Housing, which Senior Affordable Housing Committee, which was there's a lot next to my home, a municipal parking lot, and I learned a lot about what happens when you get involved in a development project in the town of Brookline, which is that stakeholders are invited, butters are invited, um, to be part of the process. I represented the abutters and joined, a committee after committee. I think it was 3 committees in all, to the point where at first it was an exploration, then we built an RFP, then we chose a developer, and it was a fascinating process, very eye-opening, and I felt pretty excited about it. And then, that's like a gateway drug. Then someone says you should run for town meeting, so I did, and here I am. Been serving on town meeting for a number of years. I really love I love watching the debates. There's really good reasons people have for and against every warrant article, and it's a real privilege to participate in that.
So,
So,
but there are 255 town meeting members. There are
hmm
3 town meeting members running for select board. 252 are not. So tell us,
hmm
right? Town meeting is a fairly light lift. There are certainly some town meeting members who are more intense about it, but it's seasonal and it's quite manageable. Select board is a much more intensive, much more time consuming, much more complex volunteer position for the town. So why are you running for select board?
why am I running for select board? I see on the select board a missing perspective, and that missing perspective is someone who's really living and working in a commercial district, in the kind of mixed use housing that we're talking about a lot. I'm living it. I live in a 4-story walk up. I I have a business down the street from my home. I'm part of a business community. I see the things that need to be balanced, that are hard to balance, and we don't have a voice on the select board that has direct lived experience and continued lived experience in that regard. I would also add to it that I have been, because of my business, I've worked with a number of individuals and entities, all over the state. I mean, all over the world, but largely in Brookline. I've worked with the Housing Authority. I've worked with Brookline Community Foundation. I've worked with Parks and Forestry. And in my commercial work, I'm in all sorts of industries and all sorts of sectors, but specifically a lot of education, technology, biotech, healthcare. So I see how a lot of different things work. I've been in the rooms where like very difficult decisions are made. There's I've just seen a lot of sensitive issues, and I feel like I have a broad perspective and a balanced mind for this kind of position.
So what I want to do is kind of throw at you some of the issues, some of the things that are going on, some of the things that are coming up, and just kind of get your take on it, right? We're going to be voting for someone who will lead us over the next 3 years, possibly longer. Some of those things we know they're going to deal with, but other things are going to come up and we're not going to know ahead of time. And voters have to kind of figure out, well, who's the person who I think will do the best job for the things I see coming and the things I don't see coming. And so I just want to pepper you. I want to start with something that you are very familiar with from a variety of perspectives, and that is our business districts. Folks know that there's been an ongoing proposal to upgrade Washington Street, really from Washington Square all the way through Brookline Village, and try to make this 100-year-old layout meet modern standards. But of course, that means more things for more people in the same amount of space, and that's challenging. You're very familiar with the Brookline Village Business District. You've been doing business in the Brookline Village Business District. So how, what should we expect from you as a select board member in managing what we're calling business districts, but really we're envisioning to be mixed use districts, right? We've
Mm-hmm.
upzoned some of it to allow for housing up above. What are your priorities in managing sort of the who the tenants are, but perhaps even more directly, what's happening between the storefront on one side of the street and the storefront on the other side of the street? Um, what's going to guide you in thinking through that?
So some of this I like to call reality-based thinking instead of, aspirational. And that means pulling the stakeholders in who are really experiencing what's going on, all of them, right? Like we want safer streets, so we want to hear from bikers. We need to hear from pedestrians who are maybe worried about vehicles on the street that they feel more exposed to. And as far as the businesses are concerned, we need to have business input And we need to pay attention to the business input, because most of the businesses here are just, people are just trying to work to get through the day. There's a lot that goes into running a small business, and there's a lot of obstacles. And one of the obstacles is access to, deliveries, drop-offs, pickups, uh, you know, access for people who may be coming in cars and can't walk that far. How do we do that? So I have been involved in the Complete Streets project, somewhat peripherally, but I've been showing up to every meeting. I'm not on the committee, in other words, but I have been able to get parking studies embedded in the project. So we have not only a parking study in Brookline Village, but we have a parking study in Washington Square early on enough in the project, with stakeholder input, so that we can really listen and make sure that we've got loading zones where we need them, because we're going to have, the streets will be narrower. We're not going to have, we're not going to be able to accommodate vehicles going through as quickly. And if you have an Amazon person pulling over and blocking traffic, it's going to create problems with emergency vehicles. It's going to create problems with just general traffic flow. We need to accommodate for that, because most people, the cost of doing business is getting tickets, so they will. How do we think ahead and make sure that that doesn't cause bigger problems when we're trying to solve these other problems? So parking studies and wayfinding will help. um, Shifting the parking policies, really paying attention to where the loading zones are going, are a good start, and getting more community input as we go.
Certainly more acute in the business districts, but thanks to COVID, more broadly than that, rodents are an issue for North Brookline than South Brookline, I think. It's not anyone's highest priority or most important topic, but it's a real one. What do we do about the rats?
Yeah, rats are real. They're a real problem. Um, the biggest thing that I understand we can do is keeping our trash where our trash belongs and not letting it out on the street, making sure that we have, you know, uh, closed trash bins that are chewed through need to be replaced. We need to be creating a system of tiered fines to work with businesses, especially I'm thinking of food service businesses. If or anybody really who's not taking care of their trash, if it's a one-time thing, there's an intro level fine. If it's 2 or 3 times, the fines go up accordingly. So enforcement is a big thing. Also, as far as the businesses are concerned, we may need to be looking at that on a case by case basis. We may need to be understanding that some businesses need more frequent trash pickups. Some of them need dumpsters instead of bins. I think that's the first thing that will help a tremendous amount in keeping food off the street. There's also, people like want to feed wildlife, and that contributes to the problem. So I think enforcement will help.
Let's talk about fiscal accountability. There's been some pressure, as you know, maybe some of our viewers know, some don't. Proposition 2.5, which is a decades-long policy in Massachusetts, limits the essential tax collection on property tax from one year to the next to a 2.5% growth. The problem is healthcare costs can grow by 2.5, by more than 2.5. Inflation over the past few years has been more than 2.5, which affects both the things Brookline buys, but also the wages it needs to pay its employees to keep them appropriately compensated for the work they're doing for our community. And that's created a squeeze. We've seen it on the town side. We've seen it on the school side. Right now, there's much more noise about the school side. What sort of leadership do you bring, and how do you propose helping the town and, frankly, the school side navigate this ever challenging environment where costs seem to grow by more than tax collections each and every year?
Yeah, well, the design of the Proposition 2.5 makes the reality that costs are growing more than we can keep up with through taxes annually. So my understanding is that every about 3 years there has been an override that's been voted in, so that we can have the services that we A, need, and B, want, and that's partly up to the voters. We absolutely need to take this as an opportunity to prioritize and to think about how we're doing things and what we absolutely need and what the trade-offs are for what we may not be able to cover. Um, I mean, that's pretty much it. I know this. We've got an audit going with the schools. I know the schools have been able to, work towards balancing their budget. Um, let's see what they come up with as they continue. And this is a long-term issue that is not going away. It's probably going to get compounded by what's happening in the federal government, and we really need to be working together towards balancing our priorities.
I want to talk a little bit about land use and zoning. It has become a bigger topic locally and statewide. The state, of course, passed the MBTA Communities Act. The town responded by changing some zoning to move into compliance. The state said, hey, you have to allow accessory dwelling units, granny flats, mother-in-law apartments. The town responded by doing so. In fact, the town has passed, as far as I can recall, at least a dozen zoning articles over the past 4 or 5 years to allow for more development, sometimes more targeted, sometimes more broadly. Um, what's the big vision? Where is all of this going? And without getting, I think, into details about specific zoning proposals, what is the right amount of pace of location of additional development, and what does that development look like? Are we talking about building giant commercial centers, shopping malls, mansions? What kind of development should we be looking for?
So basically, sorry, I'm on. Yeah, thanks. Take two. So basically, what we should be looking for. One of the things that we've done recently, and I did abstain from this, but I think it was such a great initiative, was the Harvard Street Compromise, the Harvard Street MBTA rezoning that we did in the last town meeting, where we decided that mixed use along the corridor that had form-based zoning, so that we could, establish some parameters around what the buildings were going to look like and how they were going to fit in the neighborhood, and which properties were, open to rezoning and which weren't. Um, you know, I think mixed use around densely populated areas like the commercial districts is great. Thoughtfully, I feel like you can augment a neighborhood when you have broad community input and you pay attention to the details, or you could, you could inadvertently create luxury housing, and when that's not the intention, or too much luxury housing, let's say. I'm part of the comprehensive plan steering committee, where we are looking into the community for support and insight as to what's really needed. And no surprise, housing is one of the first. Housing affordability is, front and center, one of the most important issues. And I also want to explain, because I know that there's been talk about, I am the candidate that did abstain from that vote. I live in a historic district, not, I live in a historic building on Station Street, and the street has a lot of historic buildings on it, some officially, some not. And basically the constituents near me and, the business community was upset enough about that I just decided to abstain. But I think that is a path forward, finding that kind of compromise, and just thinking about how we build, so that we build attainable units, smaller units for people who want to use public transportation, who don't need cars, a range of units, units that seniors who want to stay in Brookline can move into if they want to downsize, something that they can, let go of a single family home and move into a place that they can actually afford. So those kinds of units, I think, were what we need more of.
And just to sort of play it a little farther, what is the role of the select board? We've got the comprehensive plan coming out soon, we hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you envision the role?
Yes, 2025, baby.
That's this year, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What role do you envision the select board playing in taking what's in that document, that PDF, or maybe it's really printed out, and bringing it to fruition?
So the select board would be mostly would act as a guide to help shape the reality. Like we can appoint committees, we can appoint people in different committees, we can make sure that we have robust engagement from the community in terms of who's representing different factions of the community on the committees. And obviously, like, you know, we have say over where the budget goes to some degree. So I think that's you know, a good start, I would say.
Let's talk about climate a little bit now. Obviously, there are quite a few things that are sort of beyond the scope of the town, right? The power grid in New England, town of Brookline doesn't have a lot of influence over, right? When folks are required to purchase electric vehicles instead of gasoline powered vehicles 2035, not subject to town control. But certainly the capital T town and the lowercase t town have some influence over climate and environment and sustainability going forward. I separate capital T and lowercase t. The government of Brookline maybe consumes less than 1% of energy consumed in the town. So even if the government went to 100% renewables, that is a pretty small impact overall. Maybe it has some leadership responsibility. Where do you think the town can step it up? Both there's room to do it, and there's maybe some political interest in doing it. Where can we continue our role in leadership for other cities and towns? Where can we do a better job?
Well, we can create policies that incentivize electrification across the board. It's funny, I did myself I electrified my home in terms of heating in the moment that there was no incentive. You know, I did it when there was no incentive because that's when I could do it. And that was unfortunate. I think the incentives actually worked. So for people who that might not have been their first choice, it became a more obvious choice. So that's one thing. You know, what's been wonderful is seeing opportunities to plug your car in public lots. You know, that's and incentivizing more people to get electric vehicles where possible. We have a climate action resiliency plan. I think it's called the CARP, that we can start looking into implementing and prioritizing. I think what is it, 2040, I think is where our CARP is angled for in terms of getting off fossil fuels to the degree that we can. And, you know, I am just making our infrastructure stronger for stormwater issues and heat islands, adding more green space in terms of trees and gardens. You know, there's this is a little bit to the side. It's climate related because the more trees we have, the better off we're going to be doing as far as climate. But there are incentives for private homeowners to plant trees that are actually town trees, and bigger penalties for taking down trees, fines that will go towards adding more trees if you take down a tree, adding, you know, maybe a small forest somewhere. There's a forest in the Brookline Avenue playground, I think. Yeah. There's a mini forest that they're growing. So more of that would be helpful too.
So I think there's a lot of things, you know, maybe, I guess I'll say it this way. I think that Brookline's not having enough fun. So you have
what makes you say that?
On what you know, through the select board could do to help people in Brookline just enjoy themselves and each other a little bit more. How can we have more fun?
Like Brookline bingo? I mean, what are you thinking?
Well, I don't know. I'm asking you what you're thinking.
Yes, I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. I think that community events would be, you know, if we can get, and I think this would solve a lot of problems actually, the more we can get people in the community together that are not government related necessarily. Like I see a lot of people now, the more I participate in the town government, there's a whole community of people that get together and talk about things, whether or not they agree. they're wrestling with ideas, and it's very social, and it's good for the town, right? So can we create opportunities in our natural spaces? And we have some, but can we create more in the streets, uh, in terms of fairs, in terms of green areas? Can we create more opportunities to get the community together and engage with each other? And maybe we need a committee for that, another one.
It
But
wouldn't be Brookline
I
without
think it wouldn't
committees.
be Brookline with that. Exactly.
Liz,
So
you got a website?
I do. So hold on a second. I have two, actually. I have one for my business, but I realized. So this is my website, lizlinder4brookline.org. And it is number 4. And you can find out more about me and my campaign there. And I'm always available to meet. In fact, I love talking to people. So I will invite anybody to join me in my studio for a conversation. And, I want to hear what what your experience is.
Folks, as I mentioned, we've got an election coming up Tuesday, May 6th. There are competitive races for select board, school committee, library trustee, and almost certainly your precinct's town meeting delegation. And so Tuesday, May 6th, polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can vote before that. But before you vote, get yourself educated, learn about the candidates, learn about the issues, make the best choice for you, your family, your neighborhood, your Brookline, your Commonwealth. Make the best choices to do that. Get yourself educated. One way to do that is to keep watching TV on TV right here on Brookline Interactive Group, where we are going to have conversations with all of the select board, all of the school committee, all of the library trustee candidates. And I hope it's been helpful to you. It's always helpful to me. Liz, thanks for coming on the show and spending a little time here on Brookline Interactive Group.
Thanks, Tommy. Total
Folks,
pleasure. Yeah.
we'll see you next week with more of the same. There are plenty of candidates for us to learn about. And until then, have a wonderful time.